No.
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome once again to Valley Beth Shalom live and online. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein for Torah study Shabbos morning, and I'm joined this morning by my dear friends and teachers, Rabbi Sherry Hirsch of the American Jewish University and Rabbi Mark Gelman of The World. Mark is joining us this morning from Aspen, Colorado, which is a little closer to heaven than most of us ever get to be. And Sherry is joining us, as always, from the quiet basement of her residence in West LA, where she is trying very hard to save the Jewish world from the problems of COVID. This morning, the Torah portion brings us to the middle of the book of Deuteronomy. The portion is Shoftim, and it begins with God's command, Shoftim v'shotrim titen lachem. Create for yourself a structure of justice in your communities, judges and magistrates, courts, and create for yourself a structure so that you can govern yourself. What's remarkable about this portion is that for all of the commandments that God has been giving, and for all of the miracles that God has been doing for the Jewish people across the desert and through the chapters of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, he now says to them, now it's your turn. Now I want you to build for yourself the promised land. I'll give you the land and I'll give you the opportunity, but the sacred society, the blessed community that inhabits that land, that's your responsibility. When cases arrive that will need your adjudication, when there'll be conflicts among you, you'll litigate those cases and you'll figure out those conflicts and you'll create peace among yourselves. And that sense of deep responsibility that is conveyed upon the people is the theme of this Torah portion. And as we've said before, while the Torah portions do not correspond to the cycle of the holidays, they often do in some interesting midrashic way, in an imaginative way. This last week, we began the Hebrew month of Elul, which is the last month of the Hebrew calendar. It's the month that demands of us to prepare for the coming of the new year. And the tradition during Elul is to spend these days and sometimes even these nights in self-reflection, introspection, to really get ready to stand together before the throne of God and begin the new year. As the great book of life opens up and our lives are inspected, our consciences are inspected, and we decide, God decides, and we decide who we'll be in the new year. That process of getting ready and that sense of responsibility laid upon us by Parshat Shoftim is acutely felt this year. Because this year, for most of us, we're not coming to synagogue on the high holidays. The restrictions of the pandemic will make it impossible, almost impossible, for Jews across the country, Jews across the world, to come to shul, which is going to make things very different because usually, with real frankness, people come and they sit quietly in an air-conditioned sanctuary on a comfortable seat, and they open a beautiful prayer book, and they allow the rabbi and the cantor to, as it were, do the work of the holiday. This year, the work of the holiday is shifted back to us, to the Jew who is going to be sitting at home. Many of us will be sitting at home with our families. We'll open our computers or turn on our TV monitors, and we'll watch our synagogue service from home. Many of us might decide that's not what we want to do. And how we do this holiday is no longer going to be the rabbi's decision or the cantor's decision. It's going to be our responsibility and our decision. It's going to be a holiday different from any holiday we've ever had before. Because fundamentally, there'll be nobody in shul across North America. We're all going to be at home making a holiday in a certain way for ourselves. Now, how do we make a holiday? I suggested last week, and I've suggested to my congregations here at Valley Beth Shalom, the story of the prophet Yechezkel, prophet Ezekiel, who was living in exile. And his people came to him and said, how can we sing a song to God on foreign soil? And he responded by saying, it is your responsibility to create mikdash me'at, a small sanctuary, a miniature, a facsimile, a version, or a model of the holy place, but not in Jerusalem. Here in Babylon, here in your home, here in your community, here in your neighborhood. You're going to have to bring the holiness of the holiday here at home. How do we do that? And that's going to be our conversation this morning. I want to welcome Mark. I want to welcome Sherry. I'm delighted to have time together with my dear friends. Mark, what does this moment in history, what does it tell us? What does it bespeak for us? How important is this shift from synagogue back to home, back to Jew, back to the individual Jew who's praying for the new year?
Well, thanks, and good Shabbos to everyone, and the Shana Tova. We begin in Elul to begin to welcome each other that way. It's a perfect greeting, a good year. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for healthy. We're not asking for prosperous. Just good. A good year. That's enough. I think, Ed, I think we're in a new paradigm. I think this is going to change everything, and I think it's going to change it forever, meaning way beyond the COVID. To say it simply, we are at a new paradigm for prayer in Judaism. This is totally new. And it follows the first idea of prayer, which was really sacrificing animals at the temple. That's our first paradigm. That ended with the destruction of the temple in 70. The second is what I would call the davening stage of ritual, in which basically there's a prayer leader, a Baal Tefillah and a Baal Koreh, and there's a lot of chaos in the service, but there is community, but there isn't a lot of focus. The third level is where Reform and conservative Judaism changed the architecture of the synagogue and thus the ritual prayer environment, and put podia in front of everyone like a Protestant church, and that made the sermon and the cantor the focus of it, and it became what I would call performance prayer, where the people sit back, and you refer to that, they sit back in comfortable pews and we do something to them. And that was always very thin and difficult because it wasn't satisfying. And the final form we've entered now is what I would call the choosing form of prayer, or a cafeteria prayer, where you go down the line and you pick what you want to do, whether you want to do it privately in your home, whether you want to do it by looking at some of the stuff that's going to be broadcast by synagogues over the internet. You know, there's some people who come to services. I've talked to some of them in VBS, my dear friends, and yours as well, and who are totally fixated on what you have to say, your sermon. They're sermon-oriented Jews. That's what they want. That's what their takeaway is. And then there's others I know very well at VBS and at my own synagogue who are prayer-oriented. They want the chazan, they want the davening, they just want to hear the prayers. The sermon is less important to them. Now, in our new form, in this new paradigm, cafeteria Judaism, you get to pick. Do you want to listen to the sermon? Do you want to listen to the prayer? You want to rewind this? You want to hold it for later in the day for listening? You want to intersperse it with things your family will do? This creates an entirely new paradigm for Jewish prayer, and I don't think it will ever go back to the previous ones, just like we'll never go back to sacrificing animals.
It reminds me that the Rambam, Maimonides, in the Guide for the Perplexed, when he talks about worship, talks about 3 steps in the development of Jewish worship. That in the Bible, people offered sacrifices. And the Rambam says that's because that was the idiom of the time. And if God had said, don't sacrifice, Jews wouldn't have believed it, because that's what everybody did. But Rambam has a very low opinion of sacrifice, because sacrifice, after all, is very, in Hebrew, the word is gashmi. It's very physical. It's material. You're slaughtering an animal, spritzing the blood, roasting the meat, eating it. It's as physical an act of worship as one can get. He said, then what happens is the temple is destroyed. And for Maimonides, that's not a catastrophe. The destruction of the temple is an opportunity. It's an invitation to the next level of development, which is verbal prayer. And while verbal prayer is an offering, it's not a material offering. It really is an offering of the heart. But Maimonides insists that the highest level of worship he calls contemplation. That is, you let go of the words. You let go of the words and the prayer book and the traditions, and you simply allow the mind to attach itself to the God who surrounds us. This is sort of a mystical experience, a mystical contemplation. And contemplation is a beautiful thing. What's remarkable, of course, is that we get very few opportunities for contemplation in American life because we're so damn busy. I mean, you can do contemplation in your car if you have a long commute, but you have to pay attention to the traffic. And if you do contemplation at your desk at work, then someone accuses you of daydreaming. So where in life do you have a chance to really seriously sit and think deeply about who you are and where you fit in the universe? And this catastrophe, in a certain way, as you said, Mark, has invited us to that next stage of development. Sherry, talk to us about high holidays and what you're going to be doing and what you'd suggest for families.
First,
Please.
I want to say Shabbat Shalom. It's so nice to see everybody had a few weeks off. And also Shana Tova. I love that framing, Mark, of a good year. It doesn't have to be great or phenomenal, just a good year, right? That's all we're just asking for. But COVID has disrupted so many things in our life. It's put us on a halt. And what I hear more often is this time has given me time to reflect on my priorities, my job, my family, which is exactly what we're supposed to be doing before the high holidays. And so people come to services for all kinds of reasons: guilt, to be with their family, to see their friends, to wear their new outfits, to wear white. I mean, we have a whole host of reasons, and all of them have been washed away. And now we have to say, you now have the responsibility, the choice. It's no longer you can deflect it to the rabbi or to the cantor and sit there held hostage because you don't want anyone to see you walk out early or walk out late or whatnot. It's in your hands. And I actually kind of love it for a moment. And I do think it's a paradigm change, Mark, that is forever. And so in our family, we've always been thinking of the holidays differently, because if you're a preacher's kid, and I don't know if your kids can relate to this, Mark and Eddie, but if you're a preacher's kid and you go to shul on a regular basis, high holidays is really hard for you. It's like all these people come into your home that you're completely comfortable in, and they don't know you. You're a regular, and you don't recognize them. I mean, once I'll never forget, my youngest said that someone said he couldn't sit there because that was his seat. And he said, where was he for the last 51 weeks? Why was that his seat? And so I thought it was a very fascinating thing. So we've always made the high holidays full of traditions at home. So for example, we sit down before Rosh Hashanah and we write a letter about reflecting on our past year and our dreams for the new year. And then on Yom Kippur, we open our previous letter. Before we have our final meal before Yom Kippur, we open our previous letter from the year before and we read them out loud. And that's a way that we really reflect on it. We also have this thing where everybody takes a hand at the shofar. Everybody has to, tradition is, Elul, you blow the shofar each day. So starting today, someone in the house blows the shofar. You just take it down and you blow. This year, we're going to be making caramel apples, like our version of honey apples, just as a preparation and talking about what is sweetness. Why do we do these rituals? And it sounds very simple, but I think it's like the sourdough making or the challah bread making that we've embraced during this time. It's gotten us back into the head, moving to the heart, moving to the hands. So I have lots more ideas where that came from, but I'm interested to hear your ideas as well. And I hope that you'll email them into Rabbi Gilman, myself, and Rabbi Feinstein, because I think there's a lot to be done. And
it's an invitation for a kind of creativity we haven't had in a long time. One of the things that we're doing, the synagogue is doing, is we're going to revive, or we're going to spread a custom. There's a beautiful Sephardic custom of doing a Seder on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Just like the Pesach Seder, it requires a certain amount of preparation because there are symbolic foods on the table. There is a Haggadah that takes us through a series of stories and meditations and prayers. And the Seder, it gives the same kind of freedom of a Pesach Seder to allow conversation and discussion of these important issues, but it uses the meal as a sort of organizing framework for that. So we've created for VBS, and I know around the country, many synagogues have done this, in many communities. You can find them online, our own Haggadah for Rosh Hashanah, and we're going to encourage families, Erev Rosh Hashanah, the night before Rosh, the Friday night in 4 weeks, to sit down together and do a Rosh Hashanah Seder. And for those who either want a little help to do it or don't have family around, that we'll do one online. You can turn me on and I'll be there. Put me on a pillow at the end of your table and we'll have dinner together, and I'll do the Seder with you and we'll do it together. Or one of the other rabbis, cantors, will do it with us, and with we'll do one for kids, we'll do one for grown-ups. It's a wonderful way of shifting the focus of the service of the holiday from the synagogue back into to the home.
Let me just say, we're doing something like that. Susie Moskowitz, our senior rabbi now at Temple Beth Torah, and I were putting together, she's putting together this swag bag of different things that when you come to shul to take care of stuff, or we send it out to you through messengers, there's a bag of stuff you can do in your home and ideas. And this year I'm preaching, it's the third year where I'm preaching on the objects that were on the Temple Mount. I spoke about the menorah 2 years ago and the Aron HaKodesh last year. And this year I'm speaking about the mirrored wash basin called the Kior. And I'm putting a little mirror in the swag bag for everyone in the synagogue to take a mirror, one that you can put in your pocket and take it out periodically. Certainly for these 10 days, take it out every day, look at the mirror and see if you recognize what's in the mirror, and it's...
Mark, we're going to create a Google Doc that you add a sin into it every day. And then of this month, and then come the second day of Rosh Hashanah, we're going to do tashlich in our own way with our family sins. And you can do it as a master sin list with your larger family. So it's not just all hate for the sins we've committed as a community, but really getting into the content of it. And I have to say, Eddie, what if that Rosh Hashanah Seder becomes as prevalent and as popular as the Pesach Seder? What an elevation for the Jewish people.
I think it's a gift. In addition to doing well, first of all, define tashlich so everybody knows what you meant.
Sorry, forgive me. I try not to do that. So I think it's maybe just a little bit of tired. But tashlich is the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And the custom is to take your sins and symbolized by a piece of bread and throw them into a moving body of water. And it's my children's favorite part of the holiday season. There's something very powerful about going to the beach and taking these pieces of bread and just throwing them in. And as you do it, you literally throw your sins away. And, I love all those rituals where we're burning up things and throwing away things. There's something very purifying about it. So, Pesach, when we burn things up, and Rosh Hashanah, when we throw things out, those are things that excite me. I mean, I'm a rabbi, right? So...
Let me just say one thing about how the paradigm is going to change. It is entirely possible that in the next 25 years, for sure, maybe less, people will be able, in this cafeteria paradigm, this choosing paradigm where we construct our spiritual life rather than sit there and have it handed to us or thrown at us. It's entirely possible that through the internet, you will be able to go to find your favorite cantor in the world and listen to the cantor daven your favorite prayers. Then you might have 15 or 20 of your favorite rabbis who are preaching, and you get to sample for the 10 days of repentance.
I hate to break it to you, Mark. You can do that now.
Yes, I know you can do it now.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you can mix and match your entire high holiday service.
Right. Instead, we do it now instead of a synagogue service. My point is entirely different. My point is that will be the service.
Yes.
It will be instead of anything. It will be the service, which will then throw the responsibility of your prayer life, as you've said so beautifully, back on to the people. And
I have to interrupt you. That patching together of different wisdom looks very similar to what is the Talmud, which is the patching together of different teachers layered on top of each other. That's the internet. In the way that we're going to teach Judaism over the internet is the new iteration of what we've been doing our whole lives.
Right, but the question then becomes, and see, this is the whole point of it, the question then becomes, what is the nature of the old brick and mortar synagogues in this new world? It's sort of the spiritual equivalent of what Amazon has done to retailing. We are in the middle of that. And when I say we, let me just say briefly, it's not just Jews. This is the first year when Christians all over the world were unable to go to church during Holy Week. This is the first year when Muslims have not been able to celebrate Eid al-Fitr, their great feast, where Buddhists won't be able to celebrate the birth of the Buddha, where Hindus will not be able to celebrate Diwali. This has changed everything. So what does a synagogue mean anymore? Will there be separate synagogues, or will there just be an internet menu of opportunities?
So this question was asked almost 25 years ago when Amazon got started. They said, will this be the death of booksellers? Will be the death of a brick and mortar? And the idea, thinking was it would demolish or disintegrate all of the book and mortars, and it didn't. Because I was just talking to
Wrong.
No, I was just talking to the leadership of Chabad yesterday, and they were talking about their dreams of creating a global community didn't come to fruition in the way they imagined because people still hungered for local communities. And so on their sites, as they've developed them, they've still created, here's what's happening in your community, brick and mortar, in which you connect, which tells us that something about faith will never erode the need for that local deep connection. And you can't say this, Rabbi Feinstein, but I can because I'm not a pulpit rabbi. I believe in synagogue membership. A lot of people are questioning, like, what do I need it for? This is not a gym. This is to elevate your community. And you can't say this in the same way but I can because I'm not a pulpit rabbi. And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that this is not a gym membership. This is not because you're going to get something from it. This is because you are part of the Jewish people, and this is part of your opting in. This is choosing in to elevate the Jewish people. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I appreciate that very much. I mean, more than you can possibly imagine.
Well, and I just want to tell people, like, I renewed my membership at VBS. I am an active member. Like, I've renewed my membership at a couple other places. I won't say them because we don't talk competition, but it's no competition. But I was just going to say, like, really, I didn't do it last week. I did it 2.5 months ago, like I normally do. So that's my plug. I know the people listening are your regular goers, and they will, but to the degree to which you can share that with other people that are questioning it, it's really important, more than ever now.
Thank you so much. I think the analogy isn't Amazon and booksellers, because reading a book is fundamentally an isolating experience. I sit quietly in my den under a light and I read a book. The better analogy is that when television was invented, they worried that the cinema would dissolve, that people wouldn't go to movies anymore. Because if I can see the movie on the screen in my living room, and then after that, after regular TV came cable, and after cable came Netflix, and Netflix came Amazon Prime, and Chad Gadya.
And now we got Disney Plus.
Right, and people were worried, or the industries were worried that if I had it in my living room, I wouldn't want to go to a theater, and that didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen is because the experience of being in the theater, even though you might not be able to see the film as clearly as you can on your high-def, big-screen living room television, but the feeling of being in a theater with an audience, chomping popcorn and laughing at the jokes or screaming at the bad guy or jumping when the thing surprises us is part of the experience. It's part of the experience. It's the same reason if you want to see a ball game, it's much easier to see it on television than to go to the park. But going to the ballpark is much more than the ball game. It's an experience all its own. And here too, while contemplative prayer at home may be the direction we're going to move in, and personal prayer experiences with me and my family and the people I'm very careful, I want a community around me. I want to share time with them. I love you guys, and I love meeting you on Zoom, but I'd love to meet you in person again, because our study is different when we're actually facing each other. That's
Well,
what I think what we've learned from this.
a word about how we make community. I fear, and I'm a big supporter, even though I'm retired now, of synagogue, brick and mortar synagogues. I think they still have a place, but I'm telling you, if you look at the abandoned shopping malls and you look at the number of independent booksellers who exist today versus before Amazon, I don't have to make that case.
But Mark, I think what Eddie's saying is books wasn't a good example.
There is a new form of creating community. I just went to the best shiva of my life for a dear friend who lived up in the upstate New York near the Adirondacks. And there were 80 of us who were at Carl's shiva, and we couldn't have assembled if it wasn't for Zoom. But we were all together on Zoom. And we told stories about Carl, and it was so rewarding, and we reconnected with each other. That is a new paradigm. That
Right,
is,
I don't think one replaces the other.
brick and mortar community. It's not. So as much as we yearn the way the Luddites would gather to break up the steam engines that they saw because they believed that it was wrong for the Industrial Revolution to ever change the Middle Ages and the way that they plowed with a plow and a horse. That world is over. That world is over. COVID killed it. And the question that creative spiritual leaders are now going to engage in is, how can we reconstruct community like Carl's Shiva and other options that are not the old community of sitting together in a synagogue? They may be connected to a specific membership of a specific shul, but they may not be. They may not be. They may be a group of Jewish seekers who are fans of Rabbi Feinstein's preaching, which we all are, and who want to tune in. And for that, they go on the VBS website, and hopefully there's some support for the VBS enterprise that comes from that, like Netflix for that. I think we're at a point at which there's two groups. Rabbis who say, no, the old way was fine, and they're going to die off, just like the Luddites died off, and just like individual artisans died off to mass production, and just like individual retailers died off to Amazon. This has changed the spiritual world, the religious world, into ways that we are only now beginning to imagine.
All right, Sherry, what did you want to say?
I don't think it's so black and white. And so what you're describing is like it's an either or maybe I misunderstand you. But what you just said to me, Eddie, we just hosted on V'Yachad together Yoni Younger, who produced the movie The Outpost, which was about the Battle of Kandahar. If you haven't seen it, you should go run to see it. It's an amazing movie about sacrifice. It has tremendous Jewish themes. He's a nice Jewish boy from a modern Orthodox home who really brings forth his Judaism in all of his work. The point being is that movie was meant to be seen in a theater with other people on a huge screen with this collective sense of service and meaning. And watching it at home on Netflix, while it was so powerful, didn't do any of it justice. And if I had had the opportunity, I would have paid $20 more, no matter what, to go see it in. So it's not an either or. There are certain things that demand that connection in person, because as powerful as digital is, and let me tell you, I'm a big fan of digital. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge fan of digital. As powerful as that connection is, this is a false sense of intimacy. I'd rather be sitting next to you, Eddie, in your study and learning Torah with you and Mark. I mean, how many Fridays or Shabbatot have we sat in your study post-learning and just learned? That to me is powerful, and I miss it desperately. So I don't think it's an either or.
And I think one of the, and I agree with both of you, really. I mean, I agree that Mark is right, that there's a paradigm shift that we're going through. It was happening anyway, but COVID has accelerated it maybe 10, 15 years in 1 year. And so as we come out of this, what we're going to go back to isn't what we had before, but a new world, a new way of understanding many things, by the way, not just synagogue or church or mosque life, not just religious life, but the way we absorb entertainment, the way we do politics, many things are going to
The
change.
way we opt into Judaism, the way
Right,
we really
exactly.
embrace it and say, you know what, all these years I've been going to high holidays because my parents want me to go or because I should go, but actually I'm doing it this year because I can't use that excuse anymore.
Intentional community.
Mm-hmm.
Intentional, not accidental community. That's going to be what comes of this.
Right. Let me just say what we're doing now, right here, right now, is proof of the argument I'm making. Proof of the fact that
You don't want to be right, do you?
Here it is. Here it is. When Rabbi Feinstein's Torah class on Saturday morning, where we would gather, had what, 150, 200 people sometimes? That's the biggest Torah class that I know of in America taught by a rabbi on Shabbos. There might be bigger ones, but I never heard of them. And however, what we're doing, the three of us, or we missed you very much for the last 2 weeks, the two of us, this is going to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people. And as this new paradigm becomes fully rooted in Jewish practice, as people say, yes, I'm part of Rabbi Feinstein's Torah study on Shabbos morning. There's thousands of us, hundreds of thousands, millions around the world who are tuning into this thing, and we are creating an internet community by doing this. And that never happened. You can't have wonderful remembrances of the past where millions of people listen to Rabbi Feinstein's Torah class. That didn't happen. And that is now possible. That is now actually, with what we're doing here, it's a reality. And so what I'm saying is that we can't yearn for a past which, for all its beauty and all of the fact that we were together, had a lot of defects. Let me just say also, since I'm out of the game now, I would look out from the pulpit at my community. And I knew what I was looking at. I wasn't looking at a single community. I was looking at groups of people who were friends with each other. Some of them excluded other people. Some of them included them. There was a wide variety of community. But when we were describing, the Temple Beth Torah family or the VBS family, it wasn't exactly a family for everybody. And there were many people who came who felt alone. They came alone and they felt alone and they left alone. So maybe this new paradigm gives people a chance for more intimate contact because they see someone else in another window and then they can patch on that window and say, let's keep talking afterwards. So I think that the new world has tremendous possibilities and the old world wasn't quite as good as we remember it being.
I 100% agree with you. You just gave me a beautiful idea, Rabbi Gelman, and I cannot thank you enough for it. So many people are isolated. So many people do not feel seen. This month of Elul that starts today, make a commitment to call one person each day and just say, L'Shana Tova, and then you can hang up. No, seriously, just welcome them. Just say hello for anyone that you think just might need a shout out and a connection. That is the preparation for the high holidays. Because you can't.
Sam, it's Mark. I want a pizza. Cheese, only cheese. That's it, okay?
Right,
I'll be there.
You just
I did it. Jerry, I did it.
Wait, but Mark, you can't just show up on Rosh Hashanah day and think, I can opt into Judaism and it's all going to work. And I think one way to prep is to take each day of this month, call one person, spend 1 minute, and wish them a Shana Tova, a good year. I'm telling you, that is a great way that will keep you in the game and get you ready. It doesn't have to be bigger than that. I think that's the misnomer. The misunderstanding is that it has to be some huge self-reflection, cheshbon hanefesh, that we do a full accounting of our entire past year. Just prep.
So this morning we started by talking about the new paradigm for high holidays, and we ended up talking about a new paradigm for Jewish life across the continent, and I dearly appreciate that. So let me go back to the beginning where we started from. In the Torah, Moses is in fact presenting a new paradigm, because the people he's talking to have been subject to his leadership and have been receiving God's bounty every step through the desert. And by saying to them, Shoftim v'shotrim titen lachem, the word titen, which means you will choose your judges and you will establish a justice system and you will create a blessed community and you will create a society devoted to justice. He's saying to them, this is now your responsibility. And it had to have been heard in the ears, if you can imagine that generation, the ears of those who heard Moses's words, with the same sort of radical and the same argument we've had this morning, which is you're entering a new time and a new paradigm will organize your community, and it'll have things that you recognize from before, but it'll have novelty, and it'll have things you're used to and things you're not used to, and it'll have deficiencies and it'll have flaws, but it's the new paradigm. And that's what we've discussed this morning, that COVID has forced us to enter into a new paradigm of community life, and it will have its deficiencies and its flaws, but it will also have opportunities we could never have imagined before. And that's where we're starting to think. That's the sort of cheshbon hanefesh, the sort of introspection that we're doing collectively. This morning, you all got to hear a collective introspection by 3 rabbis committed to the future of Jewish life in the world, who are uncertain about what tomorrow is bringing and reaching toward what that paradigm is going to offer us. Before we finish, I want to take up Sherry's beautiful suggestion, which is name one thing we need to do. One thing we need to do during this month of Elul, this month preceding the high holidays, that will get us ready for celebrating and commemorating and embracing the holidays in whatever new way that we're celebrating and embracing it. So Sherry, repeat your suggestion again.
Pick one person a day, starting today, call them, wish them a Shana Tova, ask them about the high holidays, ask them about how they're just doing, just check in on them. Just do it once a day.
Mark, one thing we can do to get us ready for the holidays in a month.
Oh, this is easy. Stop kvetching. No kvetching. We have a kvetch-free zone. That is, every year people kvetch. Oh, Rabbi, your sermon was too long, and this, and the audio-visual wasn't, and this, and then there was the parking lot was too full. Stop. You have no idea, if you're listening, and you're not an active pulpit rabbi, you have no idea how hard this is on Rabbi Feinstein and on other pulpit rabbis who are trying to get through Yontif this way and trying to produce something that is spiritually enriching and ennobling and healing for all of you. So if it isn't exactly what you want, if some of the video clips get glitched out a little bit, just don't kvetch. And instead, write a letter to your rabbi and cantor, to the people who are organizing your services, and just say, I thank you for all the work you're doing on this year. I know how hard it is, and I appreciate it. And when you send that thank you letter, put a check into the letter, because this is very difficult. The winds that are blowing in our harsh spiritual and medical environment are blowing down many, many houses and many families. And they're certainly blowing down many houses of God and houses of worship. And they need help. So stop kvetching, write a note, thank you, and put a check inside.
Thank you to both of you. Those were wonderful suggestions and dearly appreciated by all of us out doing the work out here. I would only add one more. There's a very, very famous story that's told this time of year. It's a story that's set at Lithus, which is the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah. And it is often identified as a Hasidic story, but it's not. It's actually an anti-Hasidic story. I'll show you why. It's a folktale told by the great Yiddish writer Yud Lamed Peretz about the great Rebbe of Nemirov, who disappears every night, every year at Lithus. That when that service comes at midnight on the Saturday night before the holidays, the Rebbe isn't anywhere to be found, not in his home, not in the house of study, not at the synagogue. And the community missed him so much, and they began to wonder, where could he go? And they had this thought that he goes to heaven to intercede on behalf of the people of our community and the Jews of the world and the people of the world. And there comes along a Litvak who's a skeptic who says that couldn't possibly happen. So the Litvak, don't do this at home. The Litvak steals into the rabbi's house and follows him. And on the night of Slichas, instead of getting up to pray, the Rebbe gets up, puts on the clothes of a peasant, a coat, takes an axe, goes out into the forest, chops wood, takes the wood and a bag of food, and goes to the homes of all of the destitute, the poor, and the abandoned in the community. One by one, puts wood in their stoves and warms their homes, cooks them food and feed them nourishment, and cares for them. And then comes back to his home before dawn, puts on his rabbi clothes, and comes to the synagogue. And Yud Lamed Peretz, the great Yiddish writer, says that from then on, the Litvak, the skeptic, became a follower of the Rebbe. And whenever anyone said that he goes to heaven, the Litvak would only shake his head and said, no, he goes even higher. To me, the thing you need to do, this is your meditation for the month of Elul, especially now. Do one kind act every day. Do one act of giving, one act of chesed, one act of generosity. Doesn't have to be a spectacular act. Doesn't have to be remarkable. Give somebody your place in the supermarket line if they look a little more tired than you do. Let somebody onto the freeway when you're driving to work in the morning. Turn to the spouse or the partner or the family you're living with and offer a word of encouragement and appreciation. Thank your gardener or your housekeeper or your repair person or your postman. Yeah, the postman especially these days. Say thank you for the things that they do. Ask them for their name and then call them by name and say, you mean something to me. You know, I get the mail every day and it means something to me. One act of kindness to let people know that there is a God in the world who cares for you. And that is the way that you prepare for the holidays. I want to thank my colleagues and teachers and friends, Rabbi Gelman, Rabbi Hirsch. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back next week. Following our Torah study this morning, of course, at 10 o'clock, we have Shabbos prayers with the reading of the Torah. I think it's Rabbi Farkas and Cantor Barron. At 11:30, our dear friend, Rabbi Hillel Silverman, is going to be teaching this parsha as well. His meditation on the phrase, Tzedek, Tzedek Tirdof, justice, justice you will pursue. All this week. Minyan Sunday morning at 8:30, but the rest of the week at 7:30 a.m. in the evening at 6 p.m. Our classes and sessions getting ready for the holidays are beginning this week. Look them all up on vbs.org. Take good care. Friends, everyone, have a really good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.